Well, today finds me in Estill County, Kentucky. Estill County, Kentucky. This is about 40-50 miles southeast of Lexington, where the bluegrass rolling farmland meets the Appalachian foothills. And these are small mountains, they're not that tall. I got Lily Mountain in my sights here, and it's about 600 feet higher than where I'm currently standing, and about a 1,400-foot summit. So we're going to be hiking from some abandoned farmland here up through the woods on what's called the Lily Mountain State Nature Preserve. Got a kiosk right over here showing the layout of the trails. This has got a nice gravel parking lot. It's not too far from the main roads here. It's paved almost the whole way here. Actually, it's paved all the way to the driveway. And I'll take the State Nature Preserve away. It's called the Lily Mountain Nature Preserve, LMNP. This map is available for download online. And I've already done that. But what I've also done is done a little research as to what I might find here. And it's hard to tell from right here what that mountain is made of. So what I have done is downloaded the geology map of this particular USGS quadrangle. That's how they're often mapped, by the USGS topographic quadrangles. The state and national geological surveys come out and map what's here, and they color code the rock units. So what I have done is taken the information from this geological map of the Panola quadrangle and the trail map, which doesn't show hills or geology, and I've superimposed them onto this topographic map, which is available for download from many different websites. This was from ARCGIS. I use them a lot. They seem to be pretty easy to use. What we have here is I basically take the information off the trail map and off the geology map, and I've put it all on one map. This preserve is about 560 acres, which is almost a square mile. Has 4 to 5 miles of trails mapped on here, doing some loops. And what I've got shown in blue here is the limestone caprock. So I've taken the information off this geology map. It looks like the top of Lily Mountain that we just looked at is a thick layer of limestone. There's also a trail that leads to what's called Rocky's Roost, which is also made of limestone. Unlike many of the parks in this area, which have sandstone at the top, including Natural Bridge and many of the hikes at the Red River Gorge area, this park appears to be mostly a limestone caprock, and this limestone is of the same age as the limestone at Mammoth Cave. And there's supposed to be a cave at the top of this mountain shown on the Lily Mountain Nature Preserve map. And it's marked there with that, hard to read on here, but there's a little caution symbol, drop-in pit cave. So we'll be looking for that. I think I'm going to start over at Rocky's Roost and then make my way up Lily Mountain as the day progresses. We've got some light rain in the forecast in about 4 or 5 hours from now. I'm prepared to dress for the weather and take advantage of the cooler months. This is late February, good time to get out in the woods. Don't have to worry about ticks or snakes or other animals that might make the hiking less pleasant. So let's take a look up here on Lily Mountain and see what we can find. And whenever you hike in the Appalachian foothills or mountains of eastern Kentucky and West Virginia and Pennsylvania, you start seeing black rocks. You often start thinking coal deposits. Well, having looked at that geological map, these rocks are a little too old to find coal deposits, but we do have some black colored rocks here, a dark gray, almost a black colored shale here, which is common in the lower elevations of this park. So I often get out the geology maps before I do these hikes, because what rock is underneath you, under the soil, under the plant roots, often determines what you're going to find growing in these woods. And this shale here is called the New Albany Shale. It's actually named either after New Albany, Indiana, or New Albany, Ohio. I think it actually is exposed in both those locations. But it's a common rock unit in the foothills of southeast Ohio around Ross County. And it's also found in this part of Kentucky, but usually at the lower parts of these mountains. And this shale creates a very acid soil, which would explain our prevalence of some pine trees here. These are mostly Virginia pines, as far as I can tell, without getting too close. But don't be surprised if we find some shortleaf or some pitch pine in these woods as well. As we get up to the top of this mountain, to that limestone caprock, I wouldn't be at all surprised to find some plants that do not like acid soil, but only grow on soils derived from limestone. So we could have a different forest community up there. And some of the reading I've done on this park, that's exactly what I expect to find. But what we've done is we've come down Trail 6 here. There's like a main junction just shortly after you start from the parking area where that little car symbol is. The second trail junction has a Trail 6 marked to the east of the junction, and it crosses this little rivulet. So again, what we have under our feet, the bedrock, especially in this area where there is no glacial activity, determines how acid the soil is and what kind of plants can grow there. And often in these parks around here, there's both acid and more neutral or sweet soils, which creates a large variety of herbaceous plants and woody plants. And as I expected to find with shale on the bedrock on these lower slopes of Lily Mountain and some of the knobs surrounding it, this acid soil has created a community which is common in the Appalachian Mountains. We've got some Virginia pine, fairly large examples of Virginia pine here. And we've also got a scarlet oak with this goofy looking bark on the bottom with all these little polygons, and it gets a little smoother as you go up the trunk. A black oak would have this type of pattern, but it would persist the whole way up. That's how we can tell scarlet from black oaks, as well as the acorns. And we've also got our acid-loving chestnut oak, which is growing on these lower slopes. But don't be surprised if we find some of its close cousin, the chinkapin oak, up on the top of this mountain with the limestone soils. These are just small chestnut oaks, but they can get much larger. And they got the wavy edges around the leaves. And the scarlet oak in the middle here has the deeper notches. I found a real nice scarlet oak acorn. You can tell it's a scarlet oak acorn because the acorn cap shines. It's like somebody put some high gloss varnish on it. And the other acorns do not have that shiny cap. That's how we can tell it from its close cousin, the black oak. Hard to see here, but we've got some small low bush blueberry growing here in this acid soil. So this would be a good park to learn your acid-loving plants, and I'm thinking we're going to find the plants on the summit that do not prefer the acid soil. So let's see what comes along. We're going to keep hiking. We're still on Trail 6. We're doing some rolling terrain here. Well, often when you go to an area that does allow logging and does allow trees to be harvested in the national forests and state forests, you often find the tops of the trees that are too small to cut up into saw logs left behind. And that's exactly what it looks like here today at the Lily Mountain Nature Preserve. But the name preserve would indicate that there is no logging here. There may have been at one time, but now that it's in public ownership, we would not expect to find this logging slash. Well, this is not logging slash, and I'm not surprised to find this, because the third week of February 2021 is going to go down in history as one of the coldest and most disruptive weeks in the southern half of the United States that's been around, that has occurred in many, many years. I got my guest commentator on the phone right now, and he's going to help me explain what event happened last week to cause what looks like logging slash to be on the trail. Sir, tell us what weather event happened last week.
Very, very bad ice storm
Yes, this area had some ice storms. This is basically south central Kentucky, just south of Lexington. North of here had a fair amount of snow, but there was ice storms across Kentucky and throughout the mid-south. Jackson, Mississippi, and Shreveport, Louisiana, and the ice and the cold paralyzed the state of Texas last week. Much of the evidence of that storm has melted. It got up in the 60s a couple days this week. So the only evidence we can find now is broken trees. And boy, you know, driving in here and looking up at the north slope of Lily Mountain, I saw what looked like freshly snapped trees. And I'm not surprised that we're finding the evidence. We're not even near the top of the mountain yet. We're already finding snapped branches from mostly soft maple trees. So the name soft maple might indicate soft wood and easily snapped. And you can see right here. Soft maple is the nickname for red maple. I've got red maple, sugar maple, and some other maples on my Barking Up the Right Tree channel if you want more information on those. But since late winter, these soft or red maples are already the buds are already starting to swell. And that's how we can tell it from a sugar maple this time of year. Sugar maple buds would not be swelling in late February. But these trees can actually start flowering as soon as the weather permits. So some ice storm damage from last week here on the slopes of Lily Mountain. None of this is hard to get around. They do maintain these trails well, I'm sure, but it takes time to clear this much slash. And I would not deter that from coming up here, folks. This is a well-maintained park, so don't be surprised if this is gone in a few weeks. Let's keep moving on. And to no surprise, we're finding a little more ice storm damage, but it's very localized so far. Nothing I couldn't get around. We have come up a fairly steep knob on trail number 2. I've decided to hold off on Rocky's Roost. I want to get up on Lily Mountain while the weather is still clear. It's not fogged in from the incoming rain. It's supposed to come about 1 p.m. today. We started at 9. So I think we got plenty of good visibility still. As a matter of fact, through the trees, you can see the rolling farmlands of the bluegrass of central Kentucky. And I'm not sure what kind of owners were back here before this was in public ownership, but it hasn't been in public ownership that long. And the trails have not been designed for easy hiking. I'm just going to tell you, folks, to get up these steeper knobs, the trail is going straight up. It's not switchbacking. I don't mind that. It's a well-maintained trail. But if you don't like steepness, you would want to avoid this hike because it is steep and there's no way to avoid that. I got my guest commentator who's going to explain what kind of an animal loves steep trails and doesn't mind this kind of hiking at all.
A mountain goat.
A mountain goat, that's right. This is the mountain goat section on trail number 2. We've come out of that black shale and gotten into more of a gray shale here in a gray sandstone. And we're still finding all our acid-loving plants, but we'll be on the lookout on the summit for those plants that prefer the sweet soils or the soils derived from limestone. We'll be on the lookout for those. And I am going to hold off on Rocky's Roost till later on just because of the weather, but we're going to keep going up the slopes here of Lily Mountain. And as we approach the summit of Lily Mountain here, the geology maps were correct. We're starting to find a limestone outcrop. Evidence of it right here. Limestone is a rock that dissolves with rainwater, and cavities can form the size of an acorn, like this one right here, or the size of a cave you can walk in. So the geology map was accurate. That doesn't surprise me. To make those maps, they climb these mountains and hike around all sides of them, studying the rocks that are exposed. And when we're in a limestone soil in this part of Kentucky, we often find different tree species, ones that only grow in limestone soils. We've got our chinkapin oak right here, which has bark that could be confused with a white oak, and white oak will grow up here with it. But the chinkapin oak is just a little more of a yellowish shade of gray than the white oak itself. And the chinkapin oak leaves could be confused with those of a chestnut oak like we saw earlier, but again in a different habitat. So here's our chinkapin oak leaves. They got the wavy edge just like the chestnut oak. But the acorns are different and the bark is different. And the chestnut oak will not grow in a limestone soil. There's some parks near Berea where there's limestone and sandstone in close proximity, and the trees almost grow next to each other. But when there isn't both, you will usually find one or the other. So we'll get our chinkapin oak. And there's one other species of ash that only grows in soils derived from limestone. I just put a winter identification of blue ash on my Barking Up the Right Tree channel. That's BARKIN apostrophe up the right tree channel. And I've done some detailed identification of blue ash in the wintertime on that channel. But let's take a look. We've got one growing right here. Like a lot of ashes, or all ashes, it has opposite branching, just like the maples and the dogwoods. But the twigs on these blue ash trees, where the tree is growing rapidly, the new growth, has a unique geometry. And I've got my guest commentator on the phone today who's going to explain what these twigs have that make them easy to identify from the other ash species. Sir, what do the twigs have?
The twigs have wings.
They have wings. They have these little wings that stick out. It's hard to get them on a cloudy day, but they're there. And they stick out maybe 1/8 of an inch, and they're only on the new growth. And once the branch gets a little older, it loses its wings. So that's how we can tell a blue ash tree from the white ash and the green ash that could be found and are found on this mountainside. Let's keep hiking up. I think we're going to get a good view in just a minute here. And the trail markings on trail number 2, which is the route to the top of Lily Mountain, are put occasionally along the trail. And the trail is easy to follow, but there is a fair amount of ice storm damage the last week of February 2021. I would expect that to be maintained when the volunteers can get to it. So if you see them out there, thank them for their efforts. But there was a few blowdowns. I had to go off trail to get around. But, you know, this is just Mother Nature's way of pruning. And pruning, these trees all got a real good pruning, some more than others. Something that is not natural to North America, but it is pruning back and killing many of the white and green ash trees in the mid-Ohio Valley. Here is the emerald ash borer. This is what's left of either a green or a white ash. There isn't enough left of it for me to tell for sure on the summit of Lily Mountain here. So we're on trail number 2. We're starting to get our views here. And the emerald ash borer is from Asia. It came over through probably the wood that was used to make some pallets to move merchandise from Asia to North America, and the larvae escaped. And it's been spreading throughout the 2000s here, from Michigan south through Kentucky, and every year we see more and more dead ash trees. So basically the beetle drills a hole in the bark. It's usually shaped like a small D. Right there's one. Or a capital D, and lays those eggs underneath the bark. The larvae hatch and eat away at the inner bark, make tunnels everywhere, and disrupt the flow of nutrients from the root system of these ash trees to the branches. So fortunately, the blue ash that I just pointed out at the last stop is less susceptible to emerald ash borer damage. It is not invincible, but they are still, they are the last ashes standing in this area, while the others have pretty much perished or are perishing. So our blue ash is still growing on the summit of Lily Mountain here, and I'll tell you what, if you go to the west of this junction where the trail 2 comes to the summit, it is dominated by blue ash trees. And the blue ash has a scaly bark. It is not furrowed at this young age, but is scaly. It looks like the back of a lizard or even a rattlesnake. So I just did a lot of work on that on my other channel, and we'll leave that detailed explanation of blue ash to that other channel and just point it out here. But this is a great place to find blue ash if you want to study it, because there's hundreds of them up here, and yes, many of them did get a good pruning last week. Let's continue on. And after climbing to the summit of Lily Mountain. If you go west on trail number 2 to the natural overlook at the west end of Lily Mountain, here's what view unfolds. Looking directly to our south is Rocky's Roost. We're going to keep that on hold for now. I'm just trying to beat the weather right now, but if the weather and time allows, we'll explore that on trail number 8. And the view pans around. So these are our Appalachian foothills to our south and southeast here, folks. Some very popular hikes near Berea, Kentucky that are well documented, that I may add to this channel in the future, but I'm trying to do places that are less visited and then have not been adequately recorded on YouTube. So here we are looking southwest towards Berea, Kentucky, Indian Fort Mountain and the Pinnacles. And then all the way around towards Richmond. I can't quite see Richmond because of the trees here. But we got our limestone outcrop here with our lime-loving red cedar trees here. And all kinds of blue ash up here. We were just starting to see it on that last stop. And here's our view to the northwest towards Lexington and Berea. Here's our thick layer of limestone. It's at least 100 feet thick and it breaks off in these huge blocks. Kind of like the sandstone would in the Red River Gorge and Natural Bridge area. So, view to the northwest would be obscured by leaves in the summer, but it's easy to see this time of year. We'll continue on. And folks, this Lily Mountain is a treasure hold for the amateur botanists and amateur geologists. And that's no surprise. Many of these areas in eastern Kentucky and central Kentucky are. I got weather issues I'm going to deal with in a couple hours here. I got batteries running low. We're probably not going to get over to Rocky's Roost, but I've got some interesting stuff to look at on the way back. And if time allows, there's a place called Anglin Falls near here, which probably has some really large icicles from last week's weather. If time permits, I might add that to this set of videos. But there's a unconformity right up the trail here we're going to look at in a few minutes, which is real common on the West Pinnacle over near Berea, and I found an example of it here too. But as advertised on the maps, there's sinkholes and caves on top of this mountain. Here's a small one here, and a much larger one right here. It says use caution on the trail map because this thing's probably 50 feet down. And without a rope ladder, I don't think, or descending and ascending carabiners and attachments to ropes, this would be inaccessible from this point on the trail. And we're on trail number 3, which extends eastward on Lily Mountain. We'll get out the map in just a minute to plot our course. And as you're coming along trail number 3, it does dead end at this end of the mountain, but there's also another crack or sinkhole in the mountain right here. And probably more if you wander off the trails. We'll try to stay close to the trails today. Try to respect the hibernating bats and stuff in these caves. But here's a smaller one here. It's got some snow in the bottom from last week's weather. That snow is going to stay there much longer than it would in the woods. So again, this limestone is our Swiss cheese of bedrock. It dissolves away over millions of years of rainfall percolating through it. And as you approach the south side of this east end of Lily Mountain, you are treated to a view this time of year, which would be completely obscured in the summer. But it's kind of woodsy and peaceful back here. You're looking at the tops of the trees and the knobs to our south and some beautiful cliffs here. And those that have been to Red River Gorge and surrounding parks are treated to the beautiful sandstones here. There, and this is the limestone that underlays much of that sandstone with its own unique plant communities that I've already mentioned. So we got lots of chinkapin oak growing right off these cliffs. It's a lime-loving plant. Let's go back up the trail. I walked right by what's called an unconformity. Didn't take the time to record it, but I will now. Alrighty, and the rain that was supposed to come at 1 p.m. came about an hour early, folks, but it's not heavy, and we're going to keep hiking out and probably hold off on the Rocky's Roost till another day. And there's other trails that loop around as well. But we've seen the main attraction here, the top of Lily Mountain. Well, on the way back to the drop-in cave, I noticed this, and I wanted to hold off on exploring it till on the way back. But we've got some more ice storm damage there, you can see. And I'm sure the volunteers will have this cleaned up in a timely manner. A little bit of snow on the north side of this boulder here from last week's weather. And a little bit of an overhang to keep my maps dry. So let's plot our course, and then we're going to explain what this boulder is made of. On the map here, this is the trail map. The numbers are hard to read, but we are basically right in the middle of trail number 3 where the pen is. And on the topographic geology map, we are right where it says UNC, which is short for unconformity. I've also got labeled on there breccia, which is a type of rock that can form along faults. And the main geology map of this area did show some faults in this area on both sides of Lily Mountain. And the breccia was not on the side of the mountain that showed the faults, but it may still have been affected by the movements in the Earth's crust. These were normal faults labeled on the geology map that I showed at the start of this hike. The UNC stands for unconformity. My guest commentator is going to tell you what these two types of rock here at this unconformity are made of. Sir, what are they made of?
Sand and chalk.
One is made of sand and one is made of chalk. And if you don't believe us, take a listen. I got my steel pocket knife here and the boulder on top, which may remind you of Indian Fort Mountain and the Pinnacles and Red River Gorge and Natural Bridge, is made of sand grains stuck together. And yes, this is the same rock unit that forms many of the scenic features in Kentucky. Right underneath it is our limestone that we've been studying on top of this mountain here. Listen to this sound. It's a much quieter sound. So one of these is made of chalk. Basically, it's minerals that are deposited in the bottom of still water environments, usually in shallow oceans. And the sand is formed by rapidly flowing streams that go into the same area. This doesn't look too striking right here, but if you go up West Pinnacle near here in Berea, you can actually climb right underneath, and there's a very visible unconformity. So what we have here on top is sand deposits, and on the bottom is a limestone deposit. And the difference in age is in the millions of years. The lower unit is in Mississippian time geological period, and this orange-colored sandstone on top is from the Pennsylvanian. So what just looks like a boulder on top of a boulder, if you know the history of this area, has quite a story to tell. And if you get over to West Pinnacle, part of the Berea College hiking trails, there's a very well-pronounced unconformity of these same two rock units exposed there. That's about 10 miles from here. We're going to hike out. We're going to try to stay dry, and as long as there's enough time, we're going to head over to Anglin Falls, which is about a 1-mile walk back to a quite a large waterfall that should start moving with this rain coming down. Well, after climbing back down Lily Mountain and looking at that unconformity, came back down to warm up and eat lunch and recharge the batteries on the cameras and the phones here, but I'm back out exploring the rest of the shorter trails that make loops through this park. Most of them are on some knobby country with little knobs and lots of pine plantations of Virginia pine and lots of chestnut oak, which we've got growing right up here. This particular knob caught my attention. It was much steeper and higher than the one surrounding it. So we're just up here kind of looking around. We got some red cedar growing up here and Virginia pine. And there is a little bit of shortleaf pine in this park. I haven't recorded it. That'll have to wait. But Virginia pine is very common in these what's basically old fields and pastures in Kentucky and the other Appalachian states. So that's an indication this probably was pasture land at one time. But as we look through the trees here, we're just off of Trail 1. I kind of scrambled up this knob to get a better look. We can see rocky Roost in the background there. And if we look to the east here, we can see the summit of Lily Mountain with those limestone cliffs that are a little out of view from this perspective, but I can see them without the camera. So just a lot to see in this park. The lower elevations do not have as much ice storm damage Most of the trails were clear. As you got up higher, obviously the weather was just a little colder the day of the ice storm, and the ice accreted more to those trees than it did to the ones at the lower part of the mountain. So for the next few weeks at least, these would be the easier trails to hike. But there are some steep stretches, nothing that you can't do if you don't mind a steep mountain goat type section. There's our cliffs in the background there, a little hard to see. This knob is made out of like a grayish green sandstone and siltstone, and just real pretty up here. Nice open woods. So we're not gonna get to Anglin Falls. I asked the phone how long it would take. It would be a little more than I want to do today, time-wise, and I'd like to be able to spend more time at Anglin Falls than I have available. So that's gonna have to wait. But we'll continue on our adventures exploring these areas as soon as we can, probably in April at the latest. And my guest commentator, would you like to say anything before we sign off?
Yes, I would like to say thanks for joining us, and we'll do the hiking again soon.
Okay, very good. And folks, we're going to sign off from Lily Mountain, Kentucky. Come check out this park. You'll be glad you did.